Quick question. How many people in this room have used cannabis for a medical condition? How many people in this room have smoked cannabis or ingested cannabis recreationally? How many of you are high right now? Yeah, points for honesty. So my name is Todd Harrison. I know some of you from different iterations of my life. I see Tim Harrington over there. Been a long time. I'm the founding partner of CB1 Capital, not CBI Capital, CB1 Capital. And we are a hedge fund that is looking at the cannabis space, but through a very unique lens, right? So we don't look at cannabis as a vehicle to get high. We look at cannabis as a vehicle to get well, right? So we're looking at this as a wellness play. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and how we came to these conclusions, but I really want to open up the room at the end and have a conversation because I have a pretty good feeling there's a lot of questions out there about the space. But real quick, I'll give you a little bit of a context here. So I've been a fan of the space for a long time. I was actually on television in 2012 talking about cannabis as my single best investment idea for the next decade. I was a little early, but it was really for the more pragmatic reasoning, right? It was reduction of crime rate, it was tax revenue, job growth, prison population, things like just made sense. But it was about 3 years ago that I came across my partner, Lauren DeFalco, who had cured himself from onset epileptic disorder 10 years ago through a regimen of cannabinoids in his diet. And whereas at one point he was on a pill and then he was given another pill for the adverse effects of that pill, next thing you know, he's stacked up on 6 meds. It's just the Western approach to medicine is ingrained, but there are ulterior methods of getting to these conditions that Western medicine cannot reach. So a little bit of science here, and I'm not going to get too technical, but the human body, dogs, cats, elephants, giraffes, plants, anything that's living has what's called an endocannabinoid system, an ECS. And these are receptors throughout our body, throughout our limbs, throughout our organs that receive what's called endocannabinoids. Endocannabinoids are what we produce, what our body produces to promote homeostasis, to promote wellness, to really allow your organs to talk to each other. This is a little earth science from way back when. But the reason that cannabinoids is a unique approach to medicine and why we're looking at this space is you can target these receptors in a way that Western medicine can't. And we're looking at this and saying, okay, so there are 4 distinct arbitrages to our approach here. Number 1, it's an arbitrage in time, right? So we believe that policy is going to change. You here in California, you're ahead of the game, but for most of America, this is a pretty novel conversation. And we're looking at this as an arbitrage versus time against policy. We're looking at this as an arbitrage versus price before the institutions come in and bid up the space. I've been in the market for 27 years, and if institutions don't chase growth, it'll be the first time that I've seen that that's the case. It's an arbitrage on perception. Again, we believe this is about getting well, not about getting high. It's an arbitrage on liquidity versus the current private equity landscape, where if you buy into a cannabis business, you are locking yourself into that business model. You're locking yourself into a potential tax issue, how you declare that on your federal tax returns. So looking for advantageous risk rewards, we're looking at publicly traded stocks, right? And we're a little early on this strategy, but there are about 90 stocks out there that are valued at 50 million or higher that are in this space. There's about 500 stocks total in the cannabis space that are trading right now, of which we've identified about 50 that meet our criteria, and of those we would invest in 15 to 20 at any one time. And we're talking about things like curing diseases. I don't know how many people are familiar with GW Pharmaceuticals. Their Epidiolex, which is reducing seizures in children by 50%, 40 to 50%. They're filing for a new drug application this month. We believe that that's going to be a catalyst. The way that this works, once medical efficacy is demonstrated by the FDA, the DEA by law has to reclassify it. We believe that once that happens, the institutions are going to chase this growth, and we're going to see something not dissimilar to other manias. I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Bitcoin. I'm not qualified to talk about that, but I think I am qualified to talk about, the efficacious spectrum that's currently not being reflected in the stock market or in these particular issues that we're trading. So we're looking at the next 6 months. We're looking at the midterm elections. We're looking at the demographics. We're looking at 92% of the country in support of medical cannabis. And then we're looking at a administration that may not be as supportive as some people in this room might like. We look at that as really a gift, right? Because if there wasn't such confusion about this and there wasn't such misinformation being spread around about the efficacy of cannabis, then these prices wouldn't be where they are and this opportunity wouldn't be what it is. This is a big conversation. I've tried to condense it into 15 minutes. I know everybody wants to hear Jeff Mackey talk about Walmart. I know I do. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. We're pretty excited about this. I came out here to speak about the space. I came out here to speak about what we think is really going to be healthcare disruption and impact investing. And I don't think there's many people out there that are viewing this space right now through the lens of wellness. We're not as interested in the plant. We think the plant is commoditized. We're interested in the applications. We're interested in the compounds that remove wrinkles. We're interested in the medicine, not the drugs. So we do believe that the U.S. government is going to own this process. There is way too much money being made for the U.S. government not to step in. And how do they step in? They step in through the FDA. The FDA controls the process. And they start to move this conversation from drugs from a state dispensary to medicine prescribed by doctors that's covered by insurance. And we think that that latter direction is where it's going to go, because there's going to be a build-out, there's going to be industrialization. And in my opinion, in 20 years' time, this will be one of the biggest industries in the country, if not the biggest industry in the country. So happy to take some questions. If anybody has questions, yes?
Say you want to invest in the cannabis industry, but you're turned off by the fact that most, if not the vast majority of cannabis stocks are on the OTC market, and then it's going to get kind of gamey. Where would one start for investing in cannabis?
Well, okay, so that's a great question. What? So the question is, where do you start? Because there's so many fakers out there. And that's sort of the dilemma that we're facing right now. There is a huge credibility gap right now in the cannabis space, right? There's scientists and genealogists who really, really know the efficacy profile of the plant, and there's more research being done every day. For the first time ever this year, universities are offering accredited 4-year programs in cannabinoid-based wellness. I think it's Northern Michigan is the first one, but UMass, Maryland, they're all offering classes, and Jerusalem just broke ground on a $100 million cannabinoid wellness research facility. So the answer is, there is no answer that's easy. As in anything, you have to do your homework. You have to really understand the space. You have to understand the risks. We look for good management. We look for unmet medical conditions. We have a host of about, call it 12 to 13 filters that we put our stocks through. And then once we find out what to buy, then we use technical analysis to help determine when to buy, when to sell, and such. I will tell you this, I've been in the market since 1991, that's almost 30 years, and I will tell you that I had absolutely zero interest in getting back into the trading game, the hedge fund game. In my opinion, it's 10,000 hedge funds standing in a circle shooting at each other. It's not something that I want to do or how I want to spend my day, but when I look at the risk-reward profile of cannabis as a wellness play, I get so excited because it's so misunderstood. And everybody's talking about cannabis, but they're all looking at the wrong side of the pipe, pun intended. All right? They're looking at the plant. The plant itself, hemp is going to trade in Chicago one day as a commodity. Cannabis will not be a commodity, but it's commoditized. And with so much supply coming on year after year after year, I don't think that the plant is where you want to put your money. I think you want to bet on the applications. You want to bet on what these compounds can do from a wellness standpoint and from an efficacious standpoint, whether it's cosmetics and vanity, industrial hemp and farming, nutraceuticals, pet supplements. I give my dog CBD, he's a little anxious. I mean, so, no, but it's non-psychoactive, you know. And I'll tell you this, every time I see an article about how cannabis is helping to, kill cancer cells or helping to reduce epilepsy, and they have a picture of Cheech and Chong as the image, I smile, because that to me speaks of an arbitrage. It speaks of a misallocation of capital, a misunderstanding of the fundamentals, and in my opinion, this is going to make Bitcoin look like a piss in the park by the time we come back next year. Yes.
Is there a reason you chose public versus private markets, and how active of a role do you take when you invest?
So the question is private versus public, and we are only doing public because I don't know what this administration is going to do. I don't know how high of a probability, given the demographics and the constituency, but it's not a 0% probability that they'll try to claw back profits from cannabis. My biggest misgiving about investing in cannabis as a private company is, what if I make $100 million, right? How do I declare that on my federal income tax? And if it's enough money, what precludes them from coming and trying to take that back because it's a Schedule I narcotic? So we're trading publicly traded companies. We're not touching the plant. We're not moving the plant across state lines. We're investing in the companies that are doing the research. And most of them aren't in America. These are in Israel. They're in Australia. They're in Germany. They're overseas. And that's fine. If we'll go into the local markets and buy where the liquidity is, the longer the U.S. takes, in my opinion, the more benefit these companies that are already moving in the right direction. So publicly traded companies only by design.
What incumbents do you see being potentially most disruptive to private cannabis?
I'm sorry, what incumbents?
What public companies, incumbents, do you see being most disruptive to private cannabis?
Well, pharma, big pharma, I think it's a buy-build for them. It's very interesting. The biggest lobby against cannabis legalization is pharma. And, we've spoken to a lot of analysts on Wall Street, the pharma analysts, the specialty pharma analysts, and their response to a person is, we don't see it, right? But you wouldn't see it because it's a Schedule I narcotics, right? And there's going to come a point where big pharma is going to either have to buy or build. I mean, we've seen this movie before. There's a few stocks out there that are leaders in the space. My sense is that they've been, big pharma's kind of looked at them before. But if you look at the magnitude, the sheer magnitude of the conversation we're having right now about an alternative approach to wellness, about taking it proactively, much like a vitamin, to help promote homeostasis, or taking the root, the concentrate, reactively as a way to cure disease through a unique mechanism, ulterior mechanism to get to the root of the problem that's not in Western medicine's dictum right now. That, to me, this is a massive, massive opportunity, and it's not about getting high. For the last 70 years, you could not test the plant for anything positive. U.S. government said, this is a Schedule I narcotic, this is reefer madness. If you look back at the history, they went after cannabis after the Cold War, ended, and they had all these government officials who were going to be out of a job if they didn't have a new public enemy number one. Cannabis became that public enemy. And they haven't been able to test it for 70 years for anything positive, and they're still finding efficacious results across a whole range. And I'm talking about, potentially cancer, autism, multiple sclerosis. I mean, we're talking about improving and saving and helping people live better lives. That's something that I can get excited about, right? Like if I had to choose between Bitcoin and cannabis, both at the starting gate, I would choose one that has some societal redemption, something that's going to improve the lives of people and help make the world a better place. That, to me, is exciting. Bitcoin, to me, is exciting for what it is, but I don't know it. I can't point to it and say, this is why this is going to be a benefit, when it's such a, in a unique position. Cannabis has been around 10,000 years. This is not going anywhere. The perception is changing, and I think the perception changing from a drug to a medicine is going to be one of the biggest offsides in the history of the stock market. And I'm talking about, you have these staunch, conservatives who think this is the devil's weed, and then you have these liberals that maybe smoke a vape on a Saturday night. The opportunity is here. The whole side, the wellness side, the medicine side, there's nobody really focusing on this. And this is going to be doing amazing things in the field of healthcare going forward. This will disrupt healthcare, 100% guaranteed. And anybody who knows me here knows that I don't throw my word around easily. I'm giving you my word this is going to disrupt healthcare. No doubt in my mind. Yes. Yep. It's a good question. So there are some alternative ETFs. I know Horizons has an ETF. I know that there's another one coming out. And certainly those are vehicles. I think they're constrained by certain liquidity restraints that maybe I wouldn't have. I happen to think that the sweet spot in this space is in the microcap stocks, and you have to do a lot of work, but microcap to small cap stocks, there's about 90 companies right now with a 50 million valuation or higher. those stocks are not going to be in the ETF. The ETF that I've seen so far are focused mainly on the growers. You know, and the growers, to me, the only game in town for so long, and everybody wants a piece of the pie. You know, if you ever saw the movie Dave, people are so thirsty in the absence of water, they drink the sand, but they don't drink the sand because they're thirsty. They drink the sand because they don't know the difference. And I think until the education is out there and this is covered intelligently and this credibility gap is addressed, the opportunity is going to persist. Thank you very much.